Welcome to tonight's tale. Alex, the security guard assigned to Greenwood School, was doing his rounds like every other day. But something sinister hides amongst the shadows of the school's dark and empty corridors. Before we start the story, hit the like button, subscribe for more. It really helps the channel grow. Now, the night shift. The shift started as usual. I arrived at the school just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty hallways. My flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. The school was a relic from another era, with creaking wooden floors and walls adorned with old, faded photographs of past students and teachers. Walking through the corridors, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I brushed it off as my imagination and continued my rounds. Each room I checked was as empty as the last, yet the feeling of being watched never left me. It was around midnight when I first heard it, a faint whisper, just on the edge of my hearing. I stopped and strained to listen, but the sound was gone as quickly as it had come. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the creeping sense of unease. It's just an old building, I muttered to myself. Old buildings make noises. But the whisper returned, more insistent this time. I followed the sound down a narrow hallway that seemed darker than the rest. My flashlight flickered as I approached it, or at the end, it was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling out from the room beyond. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was empty, save for an old desk and chair in the corner. On the desk lay a stack of papers, yellowed with age. Curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up the top sheet. It was a diary entry dated 50 years ago. October 12, 1973. I keep hearing whispers at night. They call my name, beckoning me to follow. I don't know what they want, but I'm scared. I feel so alone. A chill ran down my spine. The words seemed to echo my own feelings. I set the paper down and left the room, my mind racing. The whispers had stopped, but the sense of being watched had only intensified. As I continued my rounds, I could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The exits I had checked earlier were now inexplicably locked, and my radio had gone silent. I was cut off, alone in this maze of dark hallways and empty classrooms. Desperation began to set in. I pounded on the doors, shouted for help, but the only response was the echo of my own voice. The building seemed to close in around me, the walls pressing tighter with each passing minute, and my frantic search for an escape stumbled upon a hidden stairway leading to the basement. The air grew colder as I descended into the shadows. At the bottom, I found a door covered in strange symbols and markings. With no other options, I pushed it open. The basement was a stark contrast to the rest of the school. The walls were lined with shelves filled with dusty books and jars containing what looked like preserved specimens. In the center of the room was a large, ornate mirror, its surface covered with a thick layer of grime. As I approached, I felt a sudden rush of cold air, and the whispering returned louder than ever. I wiped the grime from the mirror, and yes, reflected back at me was not my own face, but that of a young girl, her eyes wide with fear. She mouthed a single word: help. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The whispers, the locked doors, the feeling of being watched, it was all connected to her. She was trapped here, just like me, and she was not alone. As the whispers grew into a cacophony, I knew I had to find a way to free her, and myself, from this nightmare. The school held secrets, dark and terrible, and I was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. The night was far from over, and the true horror was just beginning. The air in the basement was thick with a musty, oppressive dampness that seemed to seep into my bones. The whispering grew louder, an unintelligible chorus of voices that filled my ears and made my skin crawl. I turned away from the mirror, my heart pounding, and scanned the room for any clues that might explain the girl's presence. The shelves were lined with old, leather-bound books covered in dust. Their spines were cracked and faded, but one title caught my eye: The History of Greenwood School. I pulled it from the shelf, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Coughing, I flipped through the pages, searching for anything that might shed light on the school's dark past. It didn't take long to find it. Tucked between the pages was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, "Tragic Fire Claims Lives of Students and Teachers." My eyes scanned the article, absorbing every detail. The fire had happened 50 years ago on October 12, the same date as the diary entry I had found. Dozens of students and teachers had perished, Their bodies never recovered. The cause of the fire was never determined, but rumors of foul play and restless spirits had persisted ever since. The whispering grew louder still, as if the spirits themselves were trying to communicate. I had to find out more. I continued flipping through the book, my fingers trembling. Another newspaper clipping fell out, this one detailing the strange occurrences that had plagued the school since the fire. Apparitions, unexplained noises, and the feeling of being watched. All things I was experiencing now. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut behind me, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam casting erratic shadows on the walls. The whispers turned to screams, echoing off the stone walls and reverberating through my skull. I backed up against the shelves, my breath coming in short. Panicked gasps. In the dim light, I saw movement. The reflection of the girl in the mirror was no longer alone. Shadowy figures stood behind her, their faces twisted in agony. They reached out their ghostly hands, pressing against the glass as if trying to escape. I wanted to run, to get as far away from this place as possible, but my legs refused to move. The girl in the mirror mouthed the word again. Help. Her eyes were pleading. I knew I could not leave her, or the others trapped in this hell. I had to find a way to set them free. With a surge of determination, I tore my gaze away from the mirror and searched the room for anything that might help. My eyes landed on a small, rusted key hanging on the wall next to the mirror. It looked ancient, its metal tarnished and corroded. Without hesitation, I grabbed it and turned back to the mirror. As I held the key up to the glass, the screams intensified, a deafening roar that threatened to overwhelm me. I took a deep breath and inserted the key into an invisible lock in the mirror's frame. It turned with a heavy, grating sound, and the glass began to ripple like water. A blinding light filled the room, and the mirror shattered, sending shards of glass flying in all directions. I shielded my face, feeling the sting of tiny cuts on my arms and hands. When the light finally faded, the basement was silent once more. The mirror was gone, replaced by an open doorway that seemed to lead into a dark, endless void. I hesitated, the fear gnawing at my resolve. But I could not turn back now. Steeling myself, I stepped through the doorway and into the darkness beyond. The air on the other side was cold, almost frigid, and carried the faint smell of smoke. I found myself in a long, narrow hallway lined with old wooden doors. The walls were charred and blackened, as if scorched by fire. The whispering returned, softer now, like a distant echo. The spirits were guiding me, urging me forward. I moved cautiously down the hallway, my flashlight flickering with each step. The floorboards creaked under my weight, and I half expected them to give way at any moment. Each door I passed seemed to emanate a sense of dread, but I knew I had to keep going. I was getting closer to the truth, closer to freeing the spirits trapped here. At the end of the hallway, I found a door different from the others. It was larger, more ornate, and covered in the same strange symbols I had seen on the basement door. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, but the whispering grew louder, urging me on. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room beyond was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a vast, circular chamber with high, vaulted ceilings. The walls were lined with shelves filled with ancient tomes and artifacts. In the center of the room stood an altar, covered in strange, arcane symbols. A sense of overwhelming dread washed over me. As I approached, on the altar lay a book, its cover bound in what looked like human skin. I hesitated, my instinct screaming at me to turn back, but the whispering grew insistent. I reached out and opened the book. The pages were filled with symbols and incantations, written in a language I could not understand. But one page stood out. It depicted a ritual, way to break the curse and free the trapped spirits. The instructions were clear, but the final step required a sacrifice. A willing soul to take the place of those who were trapped. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. If I performed this ritual, I would be condemning myself to an eternity of torment in their place. But if I didn't, the spirits would remain trapped, their suffering endless. I had to make a choice. The whispers grew louder, more desperate. I knew what I had to do. With a heavy heart, I began the ritual, following the instructions to the letter. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, as I chanted the incantations. The spirits gathered around me, their faces filled with a mixture of hope and fear. As I reached the final step, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I looked at the faces of the spirits, the girl who had first appeared to me in the mirror. Their suffering would end, but mine was just beginning. With a final breath, I completed the ritual. The room was filled with a blinding light, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. The spirits began to fade, our faces finally at peace. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was the girl's face, her eyes filled with gratitude. I was alone now, truly alone. The darkness closed in around me, the whispers fading into silence. I had freed the spirits, but at what cost? As I lay there, my body growing cold, I realized that I was now part of the school's dark history, another lost soul trapped within its walls. The night was over, but my nightmare had just begun. I woke to a chill and silence, the kind that made the air feel thick and heavy. It took me a moment to realize I was not dead. I was still in the circular chamber, lying on the cold, hard floor. The altar stood before me, the book now closed and the symbols on its cover pulsating with a faint, eerie glow. I struggled to my feet, my body aching as if I had aged decades in those few moments. The room was darker now, the shadows deeper and more oppressive. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding, as if the very building itself was alive and aware of my presence. I needed to find a way out. Staggering toward the door, I half expected it to be locked, trapping me in this cursed place. But to my surprise, the door swung open easily. The hallway beyond was just as I had left it, but something felt different. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by a heavy, mournful silence. The whispering had stopped. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The wooden doors on either side seemed less foreboding now, though I still avoided looking directly at them. I made my way back to the basement stairs, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. Would the exit still be blocked? Was I truly free? The basement felt different as well. The air was lighter, the oppressive feeling lifted. The staircase creaked under my weight as I ascended, my flashlight flickering but holding steady. When I reached the top, the door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling through. I pushed the door open and stepped into the main hallway of the school. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. The oppressive weight that had suffocated the building was gone, replaced by an eerie calm. The sense of being watched had vanished, leaving behind an almost peaceful silence. I moved quickly now, heading towards the main entrance. My heart raced with anticipation as I approached the heavy double doors. They were no longer locked. With a trembling hand, I pushed them open and stepped outside. The cool night air hit me like a wave, refreshing and invigorating. I took a deep breath, savoring the freedom and the absence of that dreadful, suffocating presence. The school stood silent behind me, its dark windows like empty eyes watching me leave. I didn't look back. I could not. I walked to my car, parked under a flickering streetlight, and got in. My hands were shaking as I started the engine, the sound of the motor a comforting reminder of the world outside the nightmare I had just endured. As I drove away, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering dread. The spirits were free, but at what cost? I had performed the ritual, completed the sacrifice. But had I truly escaped, or was I now bound to the school in a different way? Days turned into weeks, and the experience at Greenwood School began to feel like a distant, horrifying dream. I returned to my normal life, trying to forget the terror I had faced, but the memories lingered, haunting my thoughts and dreams. I could still hear the whispers at night, faint and distant, like an echo from another world. One evening, as I sat alone in my small apartment, I received a call from an unknown number. Hesitant, I answered, my heart pounding. Alex. A familiar voice whispered. It was the girl from the mirror. Who is this? I asked, my voice shaking. You freed us, but you're not free yet, she said. The darkness still holds you. You must return and finish what you started. The line went dead, leaving me in stunned silence. The dread I had felt in the school returned, creeping up my spine. I knew what I had to do. I had to go back. I had to face the darkness one last time. The next night, I found myself standing outside Greenwood School once more. The building loomed before me, its dark silhouette outlined against the night sky. The oppressive feeling was back, heavier than ever. With a deep breath, I stepped through the doors and into the darkness. The school was silent, but not empty. The spirits were gone, but something darker remained. The whispers had returned, louder and more insistent. They guided me down the familiar hallways, back to the basement. The circular chamber was just as I had left it, the altar still standing in the center. The book lay open now, its pages filled with dark, arcane symbols. I approached it, the whispers growing louder, almost deafening. The ritual had freed the spirits, but it had also awakened something else, something ancient and malevolent. I had to finish what I started. I had to seal the darkness once and for all. With trembling hands, I began to read the incantations from the book. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. As the darkness responded to my words, the building seemed to groan around me, the walls closing in. As I chanted, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and indistinct, a massive darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent fire, and its presence filled the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. A figure moved toward me, its intentions clear. I was the final piece of the puzzle, the last sacrifice needed to seal the darkness. With a final, desperate breath, I completed the incantation. The room exploded with light, the darkness screaming in agony. As it was pulled back into the void, the figure writhed and twisted, its form dissolving into nothingness. The light grew brighter, blinding me, and I felt a searing pain in my chest as the ritual took its toll. When the light faded, I found myself lying on the cold floor once more. The circular chamber was silent, the altar gone. The book lay closed beside me, its cover dark and lifeless. The darkness was gone, sealed away, but at a great cost. I struggled to my feet, my body weak and trembling. The school was silent, truly silent, for the first time. The oppressive feeling had lifted, replaced by an almost peaceful calm. I made my way out of the basement, up the stairs, and through the hallways. The doors were no longer locked. The school had been freed from its dark past, and so had I. But as I stepped outside and breathed in the cool night air, I knew that I would never be the same. The darkness had touched me, left its mark on my soul. I had faced the horror and survived, but I would carry the memories with me forever. The whispers were gone, but their echo remained, the constant reminder of the night. I had faced the darkness and won. As I drove away from Greenwood School for the last time, I knew that I would never truly escape its grasp. The darkness had been sealed, but its shadow would follow me, the lingering presence in the corners of my mind. I had faced the horror and survived, but the true cost of my victory was yet to be seen. The days that followed my final confrontation with the darkness at Greenwood School were a blur. I returned to my daily routine, but everything felt different. The world seemed dimmer, the colors faded. The oppressive weight of the school's dark history still hung over me. Even as I tried to move on, my sleep was plagued by nightmares. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, the whispers echoing in my ears. During the day, I would catch glimpses of shadows moving just out of sight, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The experience had left a deep scar on my psyche, one that would not heal easily. One night, as I sat in my apartment, the phone rang again. The unknown number sent a shiver down my spine, but I answered. My voice trembling. "Alex." The voice on the other end whispered. It was the girl from the mirror again. "You must come back. There is still work to be done." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" "I sealed the darkness. The spirits are free, not all of them," she replied. "The darkness has left a stain, and it's spreading. If you don't return, it will consume everything." The line went dead, and I was left in silence. The dread I had felt during those nights at Greenwood School returned with full force. I knew I could not ignore her plea. I had to go back one last time. The next evening, I found myself standing outside Greenwood School once more. The building loomed before me, its dark silhouette outlined against the night sky. The oppressive feeling was back, heavier than ever. With a deep breath, I stepped through the doors and into the darkness. The school was eerily silent, but I could feel the presence of the darkness lurking in the shadows. The air was thick with a sense of malevolence, and I knew that the girl had been right. The darkness was spreading, corrupting everything it touched. I made my way through the familiar hallways, the memories of my previous encounters flooding back. The whispers returned, faint at first but growing louder with each step. They seemed to guide me, leading me deeper into the heart of the school. At the end of a long, narrow corridor, I found a door I had not seen before. It was covered in the same strange symbols as the basement door and the book. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, but I knew I had no choice. I had to face whatever was waiting for me on the other side. The room beyond was dark, the air heavy with a sense of dread. In the center stood an altar, similar to the one I had seen before, but this time, it was surrounded by shadowy figures, their faces twisted in agony. They turned to look at me as I entered, their eyes glow with a malevolent fire. I approached the altar, my heart pounding in my chest. On it lay another book, its cover pulsating with a faint eerie glow. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with a cacophony of voices. I knew what I had to do. With trembling hands, I opened the book and began to read the incantations. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, as the darkness responded to my words. The building seemed to groan around me, the walls closing in. The shadowy figures moved closer, their forms shifting and writhing. They reached out with ghostly hands, their fingers cold and insubstantial. I felt a searing pain in my chest as the ritual took its toll, but I kept chanting, determined to see it through. As I uttered the final words, a blinding light erupted, engulfing the room. The darkness screamed, its shadowy figures dissolving into oblivion. The light intensified, piercing my vision, and a searing pain ripped through my chest as the ritual exacted its toll. When the light finally dimmed, I found myself sprawled on the cold floor. Silence enveloped the room. The altar had vanished. The book lay closed beside me, its eerie glow extinguished. The darkness had been banished, but the victory came at a steep price. With great effort, I stood up, my body trembling and weak. For the first time, the school was truly silent. The oppressive weight had lifted, replaced by an almost serene calm. I navigated the now familiar hallways, noticing that the doors were no longer locked. The school's dark past had been exorcised, and in freeing it, I had freed myself. Stepping outside into the cool night air, I knew I was irrevocably changed. The darkness had left its mark on my soul. Though I had survived, the memories of that night would haunt me forever. The whispers had ceased, but their echoes lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness I had faced and conquered. As I drove away from Greenwood School for the last time, I realized I would never fully escape its grasp. The darkness was sealed away, but its shadow would always linger at the edges of my mind. I had won the battle, but the true cost of my victory was yet to be understood. Epilogue. Years passed, and I moved far away from Greenwood, hoping to leave the nightmares behind. I started a new life, one where the horrors of the past were nothing but faded memories. But every so often, the whispers would return, faint echo in the dead of night. I found solace in helping others who had encountered the supernatural, choosing my experience to guide and protect them. My encounter with the darkness had given me a unique insight, and I dedicated my life to ensuring that no one else would face the same horrors alone. One evening, as I sat in my small, cozy home, I received a package. There was no return address, just my name written in elegant script. Inside was an old, leather-bound book, its cover familiar yet different. Alongside it was a note, written in the same hand. Alex, your journey is not yet over. The darkness is never truly gone. Use this book wisely. And remember, you are not alone. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, and for a moment, I felt a familiar chill. The book was a reminder, a call to arms. The darkness might always be a part of me, but so was the light. And as long as I had the strength to fight, the whispers would never win. I closed the book and placed it on the shelf, a symbol of the battles fought and those yet to come. The night was quiet, the air still. I knew the darkness was out there, lurking, waiting. But I was ready, for I had faced the horror and survived, and I would continue to do so, no matter what.